Hey everyone, this is SM Pratt, and it's time for the March 2025 Patreon exclusive Q&A video round 1. So first the 2 Q&As we do each month. I think I have 4 pages here, so we have a lot to go through before we get into it. A couple announcements. The consignment block, I guess we call the early March block because I plan to do one towards the end of the month, just ended, had numerous record sales, just another pile of data points for this crazy market we're in. Obviously, don't let that affect if you want to consign anything, but of course, if you do, you can message me whenever. You still have time. I plan to basically do this month somewhere towards the end. I'm essentially bridging months now in my time frame for each block. So just letting you know if you want to consign anything, and if you want to ask any questions for the next Q&A, you still have plenty of time. Feel free to type those questions below, and I'll be back in about 10 days to answer them. So we'll go ahead and get started here with Kenneth, who says, "Oh my God," first, and then Swiss saying, "Let's go." And then we have Paul with our first question here, a long one. Wow. He must have been second, and Swiss was actually third. "Hey, Scott, 2 months ago, I asked you about your thoughts on the E4 thread in regards to Sealed being the best investment. I already had come to the conclusion that it wasn't best for me, but I wanted to ask you anyway to get an unbiased opinion. As someone whose number one priority is to raise capital, I believe there are better ways to utilize my capital to arbitrage quickly to scale in comparison to buying and selling Sealed. For example, my main focus as of late has been buying graded, then selling modern cards that I believe that's what works for me and is the best for my money. I have been conscious about steering away from other types of purchases, but I'll be honest, I just spent a lot buying sealed and graded cards. So overall, I think I'm buying everything basically. For my question, let me give you some extreme example of where we live in. I just sold a PS10 Komiya Art Drowsy for $750. That's wild. I know the exact card you're talking about. Afterwards, I felt justified enough to impulse buy a PS9 2006 Tropical Tidewave staff for $740. It's wild. That's crazy. Those are the same price. For me, I feel like I'm focusing my spending mainly on modern and graded plays, allow my capital to grow faster, which will allow me to buy more cards like Tropical Tidewave. Okay, for my question, how much emphasis do you put on arbitraging? Good example of arbitrage I can think of is when you went to Worlds to buy those beaches and you knew how playable they were. Then you double, triple your money. Also, what type of products, sealed, singles, graded, are you buying now? I know you buy a bit of everything, but I imagine many are for your personal collection. You also did just go into great detail about sealed and MMR, so maybe that's the answer. Anyway, I'm just curious, and thanks, as always. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing there because that's a lot. Basically, I never thought in this way. I never thought in this way where I'm like going to try to arbitrage. I see a value, I will purchase a value. That's really where I am. I'm not too complicated on strategy, and I think people who are end up losing focus on value. I think value can change so quickly, especially in collectibles. Like what you just said with Drowsy is a perfect example. You know, if you said that, now we all are like, okay, yeah, it's believable because we're in this crazy modern world. But, you know, going back even a year or two, especially and further, that would just be unheard of. It would be impossible. So that's what I mean, is that things can shift very rapidly. So I don't have like a great, I don't know if you can have like a set in stone plan on arbitrage. Even what you use as an example of my Japanese sealed purchases, I have been doing that for over a decade now. And there was a lot of, I guess, arbitrage in the beginning because I have had this connection with the distributor, was able to buy and then sell, you know, stateside. And for the longest time, that was a very healthy move. I can immediately make my money back, just hold the rest for free, rinse and repeat. Everybody's winning. You know, it was a great situation, but that changed. You know, today we're at a point, again, unprecedented, where this stuff sits longer because the prices are so much lower and there's more product available. So yeah, I don't know how to summarize all of that, because the only way I can is to zoom all the way out and just say that I'll assess a value and see a value, and I'll try to do something with it and try to understand it. Maybe I guess the only advice I can give is that I try to understand everything I'm doing to the best that I can. And of course, you're not always going to be 100% batting average, but I've done the same thing I think I've done since the beginning, where I just see a value and start out very small, whether that's, let's just stay within Japanese sealed. Back then it was buying one case. You know, I'd buy like 1 or 2 cases of sets. We're talking beginning, early days, barely out of Cat City money, SM Pratt era. I was just buying 1 or 2 cases at most, and that's what I had to play with. You know, I was just perceiving it that way. And, you know, I started to scale doing the same thing over time. The Tropical Beach thing was a one and done. It's more to my point about how this idea of arbitrage is not a business plan. I think that's why I'm struggling to really capture it, because you can't give advice on it because it just isn't a business plan. Like arbitrage is something that you can do, and it's an opportunity. And sometimes that might seem like it lasts for a while, but usually it's because you have something concrete in there, like going back to Japanese sealed. The concrete sustainability aspect there is that I have this relationship with the distributor. That's what sustains it, and that's what allows for that consistent arbitrage if you're framing it that way. But like the Tropical Beach was just a one and done thing. Every other worlds I went to, that never happened again. So that's that. And I could have tried it with other things. I know every worlds I would try to just buy a value. I remember one time I bought the 15th anniversary Pika, like the first full art Pikachu card. I think it was 2013, 14. I was buying that one. That was the one for that year. I remember the Pikados was the one next year I bought a lot of. It's just, I see a value, I buy it, I'm there, I make it work. That's really it. There's no magical formula outside of that. So, I can go down the line, just give a list of all these examples, but now they're extinct. They're extinct opportunities. But that's more the point, is that arbitrage isn't a business plan. I guess it's a business opportunity is the way to say it, but it's not something that's always going to be there for you. The fundamentals, I guess, if you can call it that, of like having that distributor relationship, or perhaps in the cases of those cards I mentioned, it's because they're just strong cards and I was able to buy them at the ground floor and pay more than other people were at the moment. And, that was it. I risked a ton of capital up front, more than anybody else would, and I made more. And ironically, if I'd have held any of those examples, another good one, Shining Mew, I remember buying like 50 of those, and they all grade like PSA 8, 9, selling them for like $100, $200 back in the day. You can add zeros to some of those prices now. Same with the Pikachus and the Pikadoses for sure. So, yeah, that's when you fully analyze it. It's just the arbitrage is usually a temporary moment. So I don't really have. To me, it's just more of a business opportunity, not a business plan. And yeah, I've always done a chasing value. It could come in many ways. I just always try to understand. The thing I take home point is I always try to understand value the best I can. So that's it. I'm always constantly doing that, constructing or reconstructing my understanding of value. So I don't know if that answers your question, because there's a lot there. But anyway, kudos to the modern flip to buying that tropical tideway. That's insane. That's just because you can always get another one of those Komiyas. The wave staff alone in any grade is just tough to find. All right, next we have Free Kip here. It says, hey Scott, thanks as always for showing up. My question this month is about determining the value of other PSA grades, like anything lower than a 9. Do you have a formula, like is a 10 X price and then 6 should be roughly percentage difference? For example, I was looking at Japanese Gold Star Rayquaza. One happened to come across my feed. Thought it'd be interesting to search on eBay. And the 10s were listed from 20 to 30. Then I saw 5 listed for less than 4. I'm just wondering, or I guess a PS5 less than 4K. I'm just wondering if there's something that could help you determine the value of lower grades. I'm sure it's a gut feeling, or just time being in the market is second nature. As I figured something like this would be more doable, or bigger hitters, more popular cards, maybe data and niche obscure ones might be more difficult in determining value. Thanks again, and sorry if it's been discussed before. No, it's a good question, and unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the times, whether it's with Paul or you, whoever, I'm just like, yeah, a lot of it is second nature at this point. I rarely do price checks. It's a gut move. The thing I could throw in there, the caveat, is that cards like Rayquaza, and especially like a Charizard base, they're going to have more of a price grade ladder to them, or a hierarchy, where a lot of stuff just doesn't. And let's say I'm going in blind with no previous knowledge. What I would probably do is just say, okay, let's just go do quick searches here on 10, 9, 8, 7. And there's usually a breaking point of value where the 7 and the 6 and the whatever are very, very close. And that to me is like where you'll see the opportunity. If you want a binder copy, I remember buying a lot of 7s at the time that were the same as raw light plate. I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm just gonna get this 7 for $500, or the light plate at 500-ish or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the 7. I did that with Magic, Pokemon, countless cards. I did that. Tabernacle was one I remember from Legends in particular, where the 7 was less than the played. Made no sense to me. So anyway, it's not limited to Pokemon. But yeah, that's really the best you can do. It takes like a minute, just to look that up, and you'll get a feel for it. And there's no like quadratic formula, that works for all this stuff. Kind of like with Paul's question about arbitrage. Like Charizard first edition base has a full 1 to 10 price range probably, but even within that same set, energy cards don't, and like a lot of common and uncommons don't, and especially 90+% of Pokemon cards do not. So yeah, it's something that there is no universal formula. I think the best thing that I do is just that search thing, and usually you'll find a probably the mid-grade range where the value starts to get closer together, and then that's when I think you are in the value zone, if that makes sense, especially if you're doing binders. That's how I would look at it. But of course, if you want like the upper echelon, it's just whatever's out there. So yeah, there is no perfect answer to it. There's no perfect science to it. More niche, I would say, the wider the range, and rare too. But things like Charizard's Gold Star or whatever, they're going to have more of a tight range. But you still hit that goalie. I don't know what to phrase that as. The value zone. That's what it's called. Like, where it just gets like 4, 5, 6, 7 is very tight. And then like 8, 9, 10 can scale much higher. So yeah, that's usually what I experience. And again, more niche stuff, that value zone might shift upwards, and maybe more established, expensive, higher sales, whatever, it's lower. But nonetheless, I think that's my like best way I could try to describe that opinion or gut reaction that I have when I look that stuff up. Here says, hey Scott, after constantly hearing about modern, coming to hear you speak / the E4 community is a breath of fresh air. I appreciate that, man. My 2 questions, if I have time: can you think of another boom cycle where vintage didn't lead the charge or was heavily involved? 2016 Pokemon Go Evolutions came out. I still feel like English vintage saw decent growth. 2020 with Logan Paul break, still big push at English vintage. Maybe I'm just constant noise I'm surrounded by, but the people I speak to are so down on vintage. And piggyback off question 1, first edition base right now seems to be priced really reasonably. I've been picking up PSA 8 commons for $20. That seems crazy, especially how aware PSA currently is in general. Can you give a current take on first edition base? Yeah, so your first question, I would say the 2023 Japanese, whatever you want to say, boom bubble, whatever, that was definitely a modern, pretty much almost modern exclusive push, or whatever you want to say, increase. There wasn't much vintage growth happening with that 2023 jump. But yeah, all the other ones for sure. And that's because it was just mainly vintage back then. Modern was not what it is now. You didn't have the alt rares, secret art rares, all that stuff in 2016, even 2020, like you do today. So yeah, those previous ones, but I think 23 was mostly if not all modern. As for base, yeah, the 8s are wild. The 8s are wild. Kind of tying in Free Kip's question there. The value range for an 8 in first edition base is just bonkers to me. I'm not saying it's going to make a ton of money. I'm not saying it'll ever move and go up. When you're looking at right now as we sit, PSA grading for bulk is what, like $17? Like, so you have to buy the card at $3 in near mid condition? Like, what? Then grade it and wait for it? Like, you basically have to get the card for free, if you consider time and any other costs that go with grading, your card savers, all that. It's just wild. $20 bird in the hand. Like, I have orders come back, just being transparent. I send in first edition base stuff all the time. I'm still working through those massive purchases, plural, that I made a long time ago. And I have a lot of 8s and 9s that come through, some 7s as well. Honestly, the 7 and 8s, I'm just like, I don't know what to do with you guys. I still know what to do. It doesn't make any sense selling them. I mean, they're free money for me. Like, I can just put them out there, get my $10 to $20 return. But it's like, to me, it's just wild. It's like, I'd rather just have stacks of those cards, because I just don't get it. It's not worth $20 a piece for that stuff, because it's like it's first edition base. Like, I think the thing people miss of first edition base is like, how do you get it today? Outside of buying it raw, or like this in these moments, where it's $20 a piece. When I open up my pack now that costs what, thousands of dollars, sure, you get 7 commons, but that's it, 7 commons. And what I just pay for that pack, So to me, it's just wild. I don't understand it. I have some sitting here I need to grade, here. It's a lot that I need to grade, and I'm probably one of the biggest outlets for it, also consistently for it. But even then, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. It's so cheap. It's just like, with the raise in price and grading. Now, if we had gone back to when grading was like $7 or $8, different story. That changes things a bit. But now it's like the price of grading, just anything in that $20 range already graded to me. It's like they did the work for you. Like, if I'm starting over and I'm trying to get this set, that's might be a good example of the value range. I'm talking about the value zone. Like, $20 is like they just did the work for you. Thank you for grading the card for me. Like, I'd rather just do that. If I just double click or one touch my phone or whatever and get the card delivered to me, then do all the nonsense sending in. Yeah, like, anyway, I can go on forever about it. Just we gotta save the rant energy we're on page 1 still. Cousin Vinny said, to me, the question that needs to be answered, but often neglected to highlight, is the place in the meta of AI, encryption, tag, kiosk. What problems does it solve? Yeah, that's a whole conversation in itself with a lot of AI. I originally asked here about tag, kiosk, value added, but then you answered in the MMR. So, what is the problem in the hobby today you'd like to solve? First and foremost, as always, peace and long life. Thank you for sharing. Steve looks backwards. Problem that comes to mind: selling sealed through like PFCC or whoever. selling sealed right now is like still in the dark ages. It needs to be like cards where you have a process for them that could plug in authenticity guarantee or something like that. That'd be the first one, I think, for everybody. Like sealed boxes, having those complete verified, so there's never ever again. When something is PSA like clear, it's authenticated, whatever, authenticity guarantee, I don't worry. The second that card goes to authenticity, or the second I see payment received on PFC, I'm done. There's nothing else I have to do. That's the feeling we should all have with sealed. That it should be the exact same. We just don't have the streamlined technology yet to just plug and chug boxes and whatever it is. That'd be my biggest thing. But yeah, I agree with what problems it solve. A lot of the AI stuff feels that way. The kiosk thing, I was thinking more about it, and I'm sure there's a niche that I'm missing because I'm only exposed to certain, I'm more in the Mewtwo cave and higher end. It just wouldn't make sense for me personally. But yeah, maybe there's something there. I can imagine like being at a hot spot. Maybe there's something like at a convention center. If they can make it like they roll it on up, like one of those Futurama bots that just rolls on in. If you had that, that'd be great. Like a mobile one to bring with you. But yeah, I don't know. Outside, removing the tag discussion, I agree that a lot of the AI, especially with the NFT stuff, I'm like, what is this solving? Who asked for this stuff? Like, no offense to anyone who trades in it. More power to you making money with whatever. But I feel like a lot of it, I remember Web3 was a whole thing. And there might be like kernels of value in there, just so much fluff. It's just, I remember I had a guy who raised like over 100 million I did a call with, used to work for Google, raised over 100 million for like some NFT fund, and he had to refund like 90% of it because it just bottomed out whenever that stuff crashed. And yeah, it's tough. It's just hard. There's stuff there that's happening that's like real, but it feels like less and less and less. Like everything's a derivative now. So anyway, Bob the Builder says if PSA bulk grading is double the cost CGC, when PSA could still be profitable at half the price, are PSA scalpers? That's not a bad, good setup. Also, why do Americans like to spend all their money, then get into credit card debt and spend more money? I don't think that's exclusive to America, but I'm not that guy. So I could not tell you why or how that happens. Ari says, hey Scott, I'm a 90s Pokemon collector who fell out of the hobby after middle school and got back into it during COVID, like a lot of other people. I'm a Disney super fan. When Lorcana first came out, I dismissed it and put it in the same category as other popular TCGs. Over the past year or so, I found myself cracking booster boxes, buying enchanted PSA cards for my personal collection, and seeking out Lorcana cards at conventions. I found my collectibles spending has surprisingly shifted from Pokemon to Lorcana. I'm curious, what do you think about Lorcana in general? Have you noticed any significant overlap between Pokemon and Disney collectors? I know, I'm going to butcher this, Ravenberger doesn't have a track record for making collectibles. Do you think Lorcana could be an investable asset long term? Thanks. Don't know what that word means at all, so I'm not going to pretend for a second. I know about as much as that as I could pronounce it. So yeah, the idea of Lorcana, though, I think has grown on pretty much everybody. It's something that I've said it before, right when it came out. It's the biggest limitation to me is that Pokemon has so many interpretations of the same Pokemon. Let's just limit it to the original 151. You could do so many interpretations of Mew, Mewtwo, Pikachu, whatever, any Pokemon. And then, of course, now that you have 1,000, that just multiplies that to infinity. Where I think with Disney, the thing I struggle with is, like, what do you do after you've gotten it all out there? Like all the characters. Like, do you go back and I guess you could do different shots, maybe. Kind of like, cell collectors, people who collect, like, the shots from anime or whatever. Maybe that's the angle. That's my only critique. Because otherwise, everything else is fine. You're talking one of the most successful IPs. Like, what does it cost to just exist in Disney World now? Just like to be there, like just to be there and smell the air. In Disney, it's like crazy. It's like thousands of dollars just to be there. So anyway, I think that that would be my only hang up, because otherwise I don't know what would. To me, it's one of the easiest IPs to make into any type of merchandise. So if you want to do TCG, if you want to do video games, plush, whatever. And Disney has been doing a phenomenal job of merchandising before Pokemon even existed. There's things from, you name the type of merchandise, a cup, just look around the room, a wall. You want to have wallpaper? They probably got it. They got everything you want. They've been doing merchandise forever. And if anything, Pokemon probably looked at that as an example, because they're very similar. So yeah, I think Lorcana, to me, it's not surprising how well it's doing. I guess is what I'm saying. My only critique was a limitation on, they don't have as many characters. And more importantly, even if they did, it's how do you do like a Komiya of Ariel? Or because a lot of them are human and or like if you obscure it too much, it's like, oh, is that still Disney? So yeah, I think it's a little more gridlocked that way, but otherwise it's like the next in line to me for like a TCG, easy, super successful IP, it's Disney. It's by far the most, it's just insane, like how popular it is. So anyway, yeah, Mickey Mouse was like the mascot before Pokemon, like Pikachu. I think Pikachu might have overtaken it, correct me if I'm wrong, but before that, Mickey Mouse was always the bar. So not surprised at all about it. I don't know as much of the details. To me, the only thing, like the refractor, whatever, one of whatever things they're doing, like they're basically copying the sports model. But again, it's a super successful IP. I don't see how, I'm not outside of the limitation of you can have 100 different depictions of Pikachu and still understand it, where like, if you start obscuring, I don't know, like Moana at a certain point, it's like, what are we doing? It's just a little more, I don't know, like people have more nostalgia for that, but like, there's just, with Pokemon, I guess we just accept it. Like we can have so many different interpretations of the same thing. I think there's something there. That was my only critique, but anyway, I'm just rambling now, but not surprised. I still have no idea what Ravenburger is. Is it a set? Is it like a Harry Potter hamburger they sell in the park? I don't know. I don't know what that is. So that's my depth of knowledge of Lorcana. It's super, honestly, my experience with it is just seeing it peripherally, talking to the businesses who deal in it, and they talk about how well it does. That's really it. I don't have like a lot of personal connection to it, but again, I'm not surprised it's doing well. That's the takeaway. Youngster Ryan says, hey Scott, thoughts on the 1-1 Cheetohzard that went for 87K? When I saw that, I'm like, okay, I can see people just throwing around a couple grand. Fine. That's not too surprising to me. But 87K, like, that's good. You can get really good stuff with that. Like, what? I'm imagining it's like two people who just don't care. Because, like, the guy who bought the banana, you always have that. The person who bought the toilet seat, these oddity artworks, whatever edgy thing that's happening on the fringes of every collectible and stuff. This is like, yeah, it's just you have to meme about it because it doesn't make sense. But yeah, you had me at the first couple thousand, and then once it got to 87, I'm like, what? Like, if that's paid, that's just wild. It does. I will say it does look like a Charizard or Pokemon, but like 87K, like what? Like you can get like an actual versus base Charizard 9 for less. Like, just blows my mind. Anyway. All right, next up we have Josh who says, what's up, Scott? Japanese Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon boxes have been selling for $300, $500 range. Luckily, I lacked control of my credit card over the past few years, so I bought multiples of many. I've been selling 1 to 2 boxes of each this past month, but wondering if I should let them all go since it's 3 to 5x. What's your typical strategy for when you have a case of each, and do you believe it's a good time to sell? Hopefully all is well, and I'm excited for your videos. Great question, because this ties in actually a lot of what's going on. So first, strategy-wise, it's kind of like with Paul's initial question. I don't have like this super complicated strategy, and maybe I'm not like giving myself enough credit that it's there, but I'm not like conscious of it because I'm so focused on value that I just see the value, and what I want to do naturally, my natural state is like slow and steady. Like I want to buy and hold, forget about it, and then rediscover it, and then be like, okay, maybe I'll sell it. So like even when you're telling me right now that a lot of these boxes 300, 500, outside of EV Heroes, I'm completely clueless because I have that stuff frozen. I'm not looking at the day-to-day weekly trends for those boxes, and I'm just trying to give you my perspective, to try to answer this the best way I can, that I just don't really look at the volatility until I'm ready to pull it out of, storage and be like, okay, let's just pull my phone. What's this going for? What's this going for? Do a price check. Every time I go to inventory, and I'll come across something, I'm like, let me just do a quick price check on this stuff. And it's not a like consistent strategy. It's just that it's like, oh, okay, I saw this. Like the one time I found a box that was sealed from like FedEx, and I'm like, what's in here? And it was like 3 or 4 cases of Shiny Star V that I just completely forgot about. And I had that happen with EV Heroes too, where it's just, going through everything and find this thing that I forgot about. And yeah, that's just how I operate specifically with sealed. Now, what I used to do is I used to sell this stuff immediately, get my money out of it, just let it freeze. But outside that strategy, there's not much else going on. So, if you were buying more recently at higher prices, yeah, it makes sense to get some of your money back. And to answer your question, regardless of everything I just said, yeah, I think this is just a good time to sell. I think anyone who's been around for the past few months to a year who can contrast what's going on now from a year ago is like, yeah, obviously this is a better time to sell than perhaps a year ago or whenever. And it doesn't mean it's a zero sum. It doesn't mean a year ago it was nothing and now it's everything. It's just that, yeah, right now, like when I started this video, mentioned how I had multiple record sales. That's just what's happening. So yeah, easiest question to answer in the Q&A so far. Yeah, I think it might be a good time to sell when I have finally, I think every day I've had like a daily sale. I'm like, seriously, like, can I just have one day off not dropping packages? So yeah. Bryson says, hey Scott, was hoping to get your thoughts on the raw to grade strategy on cards of its PS10 or bust. For example, 300 Greninja Gold Star from the Q&A, there's a huge gap between 9s and 10s where the 9s go for pretty much cost of grading. What would you do with cards like this? Sit on them raw, wait forever, wait for lower grades to mature, or send in a bunch with hopes to get 10s, cover the cost of the 9s, the turn profit. Thanks, as always, for awesome content. You're one of the level heads in the room when talking about this hobby, and it's welcome reprieve from the money machine go burr hype beast. That's the all rich. Yeah, it's brutal. As for the question about grades, yeah, you're right. Like, here's a good stack I think I showed last time, and why it's still sitting here is because, like, what do I do with these Japanese rare cards? Like, these are rare pulls, right? But if they don't hit 10s, even if they do, you're talking very, very low value on this stuff because it's not super popular. But what I do in the case of like a Greninja is I would first pre-grade quickly and see what I think are the best. And then, yeah, I'd probably send in like, yeah, I think these have the best shot at a 10. Maybe pepper in some, I'm sure we'll get 9s as well, because covering the cost is a thing. It can happen. And some of these grades can go either way. Some sit between 9 and 10. So I would just do that. And the rest, I'd probably just hold and wait and see. And I think what's going to happen, the rude awakening for a lot of us, is how long now have we been saying PSA needs to lower the cost of grading? Like, how long have we been talking about that? We've been talking about that for years. Like, years. It's crazy. So I think that's going to be the hard answer there, is that I don't know what to do with that, because if you're not just grading it for yourself, there's like little to no money to be made when prices, even let's say it goes to 15 per card. Like, a lot of these cards are just it's not viable if it doesn't get a 10 and or 9 in some cases. So yeah, this is a harsh reminder how competitive it is. This is not easy. It's not easy. Like right now, like people can talk about their home runs and how the market's doing whatever, but it's doing whatever because there's bigger macro trends happening, pushing all this stuff. Maybe that supply that we have been used to or too comfortable with for the past few years is slowly disappearing and not replenishing as fast as it was before. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe there is increased demand, whether it's from pocket or a mixture of things. And on top of that other issue, maybe less supply, replenishing itself. Who knows? But yeah, that's what I do, is I would probably try to pre-grade them the best I can and send those out and just hope for the best. And then that's it. That's all you can do right now. And the only other thing I could say is that we've been waiting years for PSA to get like consistently sub 15. I know they flirt with us and they're like, oh, here's this email of like $14 grading. Like, get back to $10. Like, get it down to 10. Then we're talking. Because at 10, you can do all this stuff. You can throw this in. It doesn't matter. You can take more risks. I can clean up my desk finally. So, I mean, it's been years and in the waiting. Basically since 2020, essentially. We've really been waiting a long time to get back to those numbers. And it might be a thing of the past. So, yeah, that's what I would do. The answer to your question with all the ranting, bonus ranting is just that I would try to pre-grade the best I can, send in what I think have the best shot at 10s, maybe some borderline in between 9 and 10s, and that's it, and call it a day. And I have stuff that just sits in boxes that I'm just waiting for, and it may never get graded. That's just what I do. Maybe wrong. Maybe there's other angles I'm not seeing with, getting it all out there or going through middlemen who get a different price. Maybe that's an option. I don't know. But that's what I do. It's stuff that I just can't grade right now. It makes no sense. It just sits in boxes. Rob Stark says, hey, Scott, Rob, I'm glad you adopted the name. Rob Stark here says, is your take on the current Japanese market? Are we in uncharted territory now that Japan has started reprinting the heck out of sets? Do you think that increased amount of product and it's easier entry to the market now that the product is being carried overseas by most shops? The overall fulfillment of Japanese product has changed. Thanks, King of the North. Don't go to any weddings. If you get invited to a wedding, don't go. But yeah, as for the question about Japanese product, it is an uncharted territory. And I remember having this discussion now. It's weird having a familiarity with a topic like that because I remember having this conversation about evolutions and all these other sets when we started doing the same thing. We're going into uncharted waters, don't know what the future holds. Right now with Japanese, yeah, it's really hard to sell this stuff. Kind of tying in Bryson's question a bit, where it's so competitive. It used to be that arbitrage idea of if you have a lifeline in Japan, you can still make money overseas, because that is something that's very difficult to do. Where now it's just like everybody and their dog, can do this. Like I have guys who hit me up on Instagram, brand new accounts, like 300 followers or, barely anything on their account. And they're like, hey, I got this whatever box, I'll do this price, whatever, I'm in Japan, all this stuff. Like it's so common now. It's so common. So yeah, it is tough. You not only do you have heavy reprinting, but you have the highest optimization ever with that reprinting. Because I think if you change one of those, the market would look different. Like if you dial down the optimization, you would have the similar flow you had before, where it's like distributor to business to retail, very healthy. Where now it's like there's so much optimization that it's like all these just guys, like just dudes, like bug catchers, coming in and flipping this stuff. Like it's all over the place, whether it's, on the ground floor in Mercari or whatever, or on eBay. Anyway, so if you change one of those two variables, I think it would go back to a more normal scenario. But right now, both of them are revved up. You have the most amount printed ever, most amount of reprint orders I've ever made, in the past decade or whatever. And on top of that, the most optimization. That's why prices are more flat. Obviously, some sets are better than others, but yeah, they're different than what it used to be. I always had room in the $75 to $100 range on a new box. That's usually what I was selling them for. Like a slower set would be towards the 75 number, a better set would be higher. Now it's just like you can't guarantee that for anything. That's why I always wanted to do the Rudy model where I sell stuff, but I can never do it because it would be like it's one way or the other. It's like I can never get products. So, and then there was a brief moment there for a year or so. In recent history, of course, in the past it was different, but where I could do that thing of just selling it, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can start, doing this for Patreon members, but it's not possible. Even with all this printing now, it's like it's just not profitable. Like no one's making any money with it unless you're these guys who are, I don't even know how they're doing it. I really don't know how some of these guys are selling at these prices. So anyway, yeah, if the key focus there is if you had one of those two aspects dialed down, the supply, which is revved up, and then the optimization all-time high. If one of those cooled off, I think it would be a little more normal, but they're both just full blast right now. All right, the Pokeshed says, hey, Scott, just curious on the collector fund you discussed. Wonder if there's any more details on what it might be, what it might include, or the more investment opportunities with it. When does it plan on starting? Thanks. Hope all is well, Pierce. I don't know. You and Lucky Carp every time, dude. I swear. Lucky Carp's waiting right after this. You guys always come in at the same time. So I haven't heard any more outside of it's just early days. What I shared is like the intention of the fund. There's a lot of people involved that make it seem more feasible. But let's say everything is just going right now. Like they push go and it just starts. It's still going to take years to acquire everything. So I think all it is at the first stage would be acquisition, or before that, raising funds, then acquiring the assets, and then at that point, figuring out how to, make that tradable. That's beyond my expertise at that level, but I don't know when that would happen. If I had to guess, this is probably a multi-year process. Of course, any details I get, I'll let you know, and if it gets to the point where it materializes, like when they plan to take it to market and all that stuff, I'd let you guys know right away when I have that information. But again, this is so early days. It's basically like we have an idea and we have the right people talking to each other who want to do this. We just got to figure out a way to commit everybody in and make everybody happy. Because the unfortunate reality is like everyone's an adult and has things to do. So we can't just be like hanging out like, hey, like, let's just make this thing happen all the time in the world. It's like everyone's got their obligations. So if we can, all that can be sorted, then I think you get to the next phase of raising capital. But yeah, I'll let you know. It's just a big wait and see. The only reason I mentioned it is because it's much more plausible with who's involved than like anything else that's ever been pitched to me. I've had guys who spent, and some made me so sad after the call, like they spent so much money on their project. Like I knew guys that wanted to plug into PWCC, thought they were going to be this like new marketplace. I can't even tell you the names, I completely forgot. Like it's, again, can't overstate how competitive the market is. And yeah, this is one I never mentioned that. I don't even think I ever mentioned, or maybe I did. I probably even then when it was fresh, I couldn't remember the name. So anyway, I've had so many pitches, and this one just felt a little more promising. But again, super early days. Trying to do my best to describe what it looks like, and anything I get, I'll let you guys know in a video. The Lucky Carp says, "Hey Scott, we often, always right after it appears, we often talk about here how rare yet obscure cards. I know you're thinking of a couple lab coats and certain 3-letter acronym right now, but the PCL isn't the only player in the locker room. I recently managed to grade 2 PS10s that are possibly more obscure, the Raichu and Pikachu Classroom black and white promo cards. While happy with the grades, my question is a simple one. What now? It'd be basically impossible to reacquire these, and their market value is nowhere representative of the rarity. Do you have a strategy with cards like this, the PCL, PokePark, etc., where perennial fall into underrated status gives lack of exposure? Thanks, Max." Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing I've been telling everybody else in the answers here. They just get thrown into storage. That's what I do with them. I just put them in I just store them. I can't. When I look at a card that focus on value, we've really just kept talking about the same topics of, the focus on value. I just can't get past it for stuff like that. And I'm at a point, luckily, where I'm just like, I don't need the extra $100 to sell this card today. I'd rather just wait and see what's going to happen with it. And I think a lot of people are in that camp now with this stuff. And that's just what it is. Whether it's your insanely obscure Classroom card or PCL, whatever it is. PokePark stuff is another good one. All of that. I don't even have I have like maybe a handful of PCLs, by the way. And they've just been sitting there. They've just been sitting in the same place. Some are like 2 certs. Like they've been sitting there for a long, long time, probably 10 years old. So that's just what I do. I don't really have much of a plan beyond that. It's not limited to these cards. Like I mentioned with the first edition base, 8s, 7s, and all that. They just sit. They just sit in storage. Even some of the boxes, some that even have gone up in value, it's just not worth it. Do I want to go through, buy a whole bunch of bubble mailers, do all the work of, buying, selling, all that? Like, it's just, that's why, like, EV Heroes, I was so aware of it earlier when I answered that question, because it's easier to sell, like, an item at that price of $400 or whatever than is to do, like, sweating out, $20 profit a piece on all those boxes. It's just easier. It feels more appropriate to be like, okay, I'm getting multiple hundreds here on the profit. I don't mind taking my time doing the package and all that. So that's where I am with this stuff too. That's the practical perspective, and then the value one is the biggest one. I just don't even care. Everything goes away when I look at a card. I'm like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. If I don't need to sell it, I'm not going to do it. That's it. I just don't want to do it. Now, of course, if any of these went up in value, that would change things a bit. But even then, it still comes back to that. I'm always doing a value assessment, and I can't stop doing it. I can't turn it off. Sometimes it's a problem. And with cards like that, yeah, the boring answer is they just go into storage. Like the cards that can't be graded right now because the same problem, the value, or the cards that don't make sense selling, whether it's versus base or some of this vintage stuff that's going for a fraction of the modern. I'll just keep holding it. Shadowless is one too that's been in the shadows. It's been there. There's a shadow on a lot of those shadowless cards now because they've been in the dark a long time. I bet if I pull it out, it's gonna have that little shadow there, like unlimited. So yeah, there's plenty that have been in storage for ages because it just doesn't really feel right. And some of them might have even gone up. It just doesn't feel like they're actualizing the value that they deserve. So yeah, that's the same old boring answer, I guess. Bone says, "Hey Scott, I'm asking the question half jokingly, but I kind of thought it'd be an interesting tactic from Pokemon regarding reprints. Do you think Pokemon would ever drop a stink bomb of a set on purpose?" That is crazy. I never thought of that before. So they could buy more time and make the Jerome Powell printers go burr when they catch up on previous sets. Honestly, as crazy as that sounds, yeah, it still wouldn't work though. That's the problem. As long as there's a single art or secret art rare in there, it's not gonna be enough. Like they'd really have to butcher it. They'd have to do like emerging powers level of butchering for that to work. But yeah, they've never done that. I don't think the logistics on how cards are printed, but it seems difficult to have a meaningful reprint for multiple high demand sets while having to print upcoming sets. Don't blink now, but the Blues are sniffing a wildcard spot. See you in QA2. Yeah, Winnington's back at it ever since the Battle of Nations, whatever that was. But yeah, the thing about a bad set, you're not, I know you're being tongue-in-cheek, but you're not off in that the printers are full of cards. Like people, the number one stat I love, I can never say this stat enough. In 1999, multiple sports sets didn't get a print because Pokemon was so popular and it was clogging all the printers. Like, people don't realize, like, this is all finite. Like, we're so used to everything being digital, where it's just seemingly infinite. But, like, this is seriously finite. Like, the level of demand that we have right now is because the printers literally can't catch up to it. Even though we're in unprecedented billions out there, we still can't catch that demand. And this is nothing new. Like, in that thing I just mentioned in the 90s, it was so nuts that, like, some sport card sets were just like, sorry, we don't get a 99 release because Pikachu, he's hogging the printer. So you're not off in that idea. That is something that has happened now multiple times, multiple iterations of that. I don't know if a stink bomb set would work. Perhaps delaying a set, maybe that's an angle. Yeah, I don't know, because it is all finite. I think what they did back then is they just went into other places where sports cards were printed and said, hey, we need to get this stuff out there. It's also partly why Jungle Fossil have so much silvering on the fronts, because of dull blades. Just cutting and cutting and cutting, like no break whatsoever. You know, just like Arita during his early signings, where he's doing 14 hours of constantly signing with coffee. You know, that's what it was. It was just a lot of that. So that's where we are now. We're back at that sweat grind mode, and they just need more printers. Maybe delaying a set would be the answer. I don't know if doing a pooper would do much, because they still have to print it and they still have to design it and everything. But you're not entirely off. Like, that is a real thing that could help. Like, just maybe pausing a release for a couple months and just printing all these sets would be great. You know, I don't know why Pokemon just they just don't see all this. They don't see all this stuff. We're like way down here in like the gladiator pits, you know, not even in like the main arena in Rome. We're like in we're in like Varese or somewhere, some obscure place in Italy. It's like we're not in the main arena, but we're like in the pits. They don't even see it. They don't even see what's going on, because Pokemon just like, whatever, lying on their marble chair with grapes being fed to them. Like, they have no idea what is happening. So anyway, that you're not wrong with that. It's just, I don't think Pokemon has the awareness. And if they had, like, if I could just get a day, give me 24 hours in there, I would wipe out all these problems. Because I'm like, look, do this, you're good. You're good. That's it. Just do it and you're good. All right. And anyway, you're not wrong. It's just, I don't think they see us. E-Tango says, hey Scott, back in 2020, the vintage barrier to entry was due to prices being quite high compared to modern. Nowadays, the insane demand modern has, people are paying 2020 vintage prices for certain modern cards. Best example would be PS10 Moonbreon selling for 2.5 to 3K. Is there still a barrier to entry vintage? If it's the knowledge it takes to get into vintage, one could say that today is where collectors have the most access to knowledge and they have at any given point in time. So it's safe to say that is there a barrier to vintage anymore? Or am I missing something? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. On that note, is it currently slightly barrier to entry to modern? Cheers. That's actually an interesting take, because I think you're highlighting the average discretionary income and how it's increased more than anything. Because someone who's willing to throw around a few K on like a Moonbreon or whatever, I think that's just showing you where discretionary income has gotten to for a lot of people, especially the wheeler dealers. You know, like, it used to be like, oh, here's the 20 businesses or the 50 total businesses, right? They're going to put up a shop at a regionals or whatever convention. Now it's like anybody and their dog can, you know, be a vendor or whatever. And I'm not criticizing. It's just the reality where we are. So because of that, it increases not only the sales volume frequency, but also discretionary income. Like, what would have been $100, $500 ceiling back in the day has now gone up for the average person doing all of these things in a context. So I think that's what you're hitting at more there. And I still think a lot of vintage has a barrier. Like, when you're comparing Moonbreon, we got to understand that's like the best of the best. That's like one of the top cards in modern. So when we properly translate that to vintage, you're going to be looking at like some of the top stuff in vintage, not like the PSA 10 Poliwag. You know, we're going to look at like Blastoise or Charizard or trophies or whatever. You know, that would be more comparable. And that's even when I remember the biggest bubble, the height of the bubble with all the waifus, I'm like, this is still not even close to like what's going on. And not only close in literal price, but more importantly, sales volume. Because it's one thing to get a great price on a great sale. It's another thing to do that over and over and over and over. You know, like Illustrator is the best example of this. How many times has Illustrator sold for 6 figures? I don't even know at this point. And so, yeah, there's obviously volatility. Maybe it's down, maybe it's up, maybe it's mid. Who cares? The point is, it sells hand over fist at that price range. That's what sales volume means. And that's, I think, the harder barrier to entry because a lot of the stuff in modern can do like what a lot of the waifus did and then just go right back down. Like the waifu stuff was so wild, it went so high, and then a lot of it, I know the lilies and other ones that have a little more fundamentals to them stayed higher, but a lot of those set ones went so high and then right back down. So that's why I'm hesitant to just say barrier to entry to modern, because I think the sales volume is still on the side more of those vintage things. Also, apologies, I have people cleaning if you're hearing noises above on top of the mute cave. But anyway, that's I think where you are, is that there is something what you're saying about barrier has increased, but I think it's more about discretionary income. And if anything, your first point about vintage, I think is valuable, that you have less worry, if you will, more consumer confidence of buying a lot. Today, it's a great time for consumer confidence and cost of capital for vintage. As far as those are concerned, I honestly can't think of a better time, because you can look at the stuff that's being printed right now and you're like, okay, people are spending this amount on that. I feel much better buying this card over here that's the same, if not sometimes less, than some of the stuff over here that's on the shelves at Target. To me, that's consumer confidence, cost of capital, and probably to your point, another way to say that is like, less barrier to entry. But yeah, I'm arguing more the Moonbryon versus the top stuff in vintage. But yeah, I think you have something there on the more accessible, more day-to-day stuff. Yeah, to me, the barrier is just, do you like it? Because a lot of this modern stuff has escalated so quickly that it's like, stuff used to be like 5 years if we really saw significant growth, and now it's like, give it 5 months. Some of this stuff is like, give it 5 weeks. It's wild. So anyway, yeah, I think that's another good way to summarize this same conversation of cost of capital, value or whatever, and consumer confidence. Etango again says, all right, another question. This one going over the emotional cost of collecting. Has the emotional cost increased in the hobby over the years? You mentioned before how there's not one noise today not to mention how many people are behaving to the current unprecedented amount of demand hype modern has. Is it safe to say that there's way less emotional cost to being in the hobby back in 2020, 16, 2000, and this one is purely hypothetical. Say some whale buys your illustrator tomorrow for the full price. Would you let the sale go through? What would your mindset be? Would it be bittersweet? How would that affect your living your life now? What would change? Would you spend less time with collecting? In general, cheers. I'd have to take that deal. There's no way I couldn't take that deal. Because I'd also probably just go buy another one. Use that money to buy. That is one of the things, maybe speaking of arbitrage, is knowledge. I have people in my inbox literally before I sat down who are offering me an 8 and a 9 illustrator, before I sat down. So it's like, yeah, if that happened, I'd just be like, okay, I'll buy that one. Because that's the advantage of, doing this so long and having connections. But yeah, in relation to what you're talking about, with the emotional cost collecting, it kind of ties into your follow-up question there, because yeah, I probably would spend less time on the day-to-day. I would still do a lot for Patreon. I would probably try to keep that up as long as I could, because it gives me a purpose, it gives me something to do, and keeps me sharp, I guess. But I've already dialed down the day-to-day worry. I used to worry too much about the day-to-day, and I think I would do that even less, because it's just the value proposition, it's just not there for me. So yeah, that's probably what I do. And then as far as emotional costs, comparing it to other eras, it's hard. I don't want to be a dead horse, but yeah, it's hard not to think about how when things are more simple, they're more simple. That's it. That's really the TLDR. I don't need to go into a therapy session, but yeah, when things are just more simple, they're more simple. That's all it is. I mean, that's what it used to be. You always hear boomers like, we only had a rock and a stick to play with. We're not talking prehistoric era. It was just, when there were less zeros, there was less noise with it. There was less to hype. Today you have to be more, and this isn't limited to Pokemon. It's true to all of life right now. You have to actively turn things off. It's funny because I promise it's related. I just had a conversation, always doing this philosophical talk with people that are close to me, about how a lot of the stuff back in the day has flatlined. The luxuries of 20 years ago are just standards today. Think about an intercom system in a home, how ridiculous that is, security back in the day. It's anyone can buy a Nest, or whatever. What's the thing, a Ring, or, whatever it is, Century Safe, whatever brand you're into. But it's that stuff is so accessible now. All these things that were luxury goods are so accessible now. And your phone alone. I remember that cliche of like, your math teacher's like, you won't have a calculator in your pocket. It's like, well, now you have like a supercomputer for when they said that 20 years ago. But my point is that now that everybody has this stuff, the luxury is not needing to use it, not needing it to dictate your life or whatever. And I think that ties into like the lifestyle definitely affects collecting. I think we focus so much on the product without realizing like this is a lifestyle now. It's a hobby. It's a way people live. And all of these things going on in society affect that. If we go back to 2000, you didn't have any of this stuff. So the way you existed in that lifestyle, the lifestyle itself was different. Back then when the intercom system was like a big flex in a house, like that stuff was it. Like that was the top back then. There was no iPhone. There wasn't constant notifications, just social media. So that lifestyle, I think, was more simplified. And your emotional cost is much lower because you were just dealing in person. And, that's why I think a lot of us are so fond of the Toys R Us meetups and things like that, because it was just that. You were just there. There was no distraction. There was no in and out, checking my phone's buzzing, whatever. You're just there doing it, living. So there's something to that. I try to promise not to go into therapy, but it's hard. Just the ideas that come to mind on that are there. Like it's, not even getting into the noise. And I would say, I think Pokemon in particular overvalues drama. That's probably the easiest way to say it. I think it's probably one of the most like, what's it called? Cannibalistic. It can be very cannibalistic in my experience. And I think like other hobbies are in danger. That I see stuff like that in video games sometimes. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, it's just a little too overvalued. And again, that goes to that very point of noise. Like you couldn't be like that back in the day. So yeah, when it was more simple, all that stuff was simple. Wasn't as much opportunity to do as a livelihood, but I think the enjoyment level was just easier. Where now I feel like currently I'm at a better place than I was, let's say, a few years ago. But that's because I've really had to actively like shut off devices, not worry as much about the day-to-day. So you really have to like basically protect yourself from the noise. It's weird. Like it's an odd thing. It's so odd. Like before it's like, yeah, you always answer the phone. When the phone rings 20 years ago, you're like, oh, let's see who it is. Where now I'm like, my phone's always on silent. Like, because everyone's trying to annoy you. Like every email notification, it's like, God. So anyway, I'm sorry. I promise I wouldn't do this, but it's something there. There's that lifestyle thing I think does answer your question. I think the lifestyle of how you engage back in the day was healthier because you didn't have as many distractions. And I think that's why we're all so fond for the SSB era, the TMB era, the Toys R Us era, whatever you want to say, because it was just so simple. You're there doing it. There's something in there and how that is. And I think the emotional cost is higher today. You just have to be more vigilant, to get that same enjoyment. The Lucky Carp says, hey, Scott, jumping in with another question. One theme in the market at the moment, modern to the moon while vintage stagnates. It seems to me that modern boom is being driven by new market participants, rip shippers, TikTokers, and infamous scalpers. Whereas the 2016 and 2020 booms in vintage and Japanese promos are primarily driven by people like us, collectors and investors. If we broadly agree the market is split like this, I wonder where the collectors have gone. Pulled into the modern hype during or lurking everywhere. Personally, I'm keeping away from modern, but spending less on cards in general. The opportunity isn't as glaring, and I'm grading my backlog built since 2016 and the PSA closures. Given limited capital, grading and buying new cards or substitute goods, focusing on the former not only decreases demand for the cards, but it also increases supply of graded ones on the market. Just theory based on my spending habits, but could be explaining the vintage stagnation on a macro level. Thanks, Max. There's something to what you said about how a lot of the market complexion today is comprised more of these quick flip guys, like collector LLCs. That's what it is now. Before it was collector investor. That was really what you had, the main two. And then of course a business, was trying to do that. But yeah, everybody's a collector LLC now. They're branding. Sorry again about the noise if you're hearing the vacuum. But yeah, I think that's really what it is that you have a different complexion in the market. And I think that's why you see such a spike in modern. Again, trying to figure out why, going all the way back to the roots, why this stuff's happening. The causes are because it's accessible. It's harder to do vintage because of the barrier to entry. These guys coming in, like I see them, some of them buy product from me and I'll just check their page on a whim. I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I lose track of who they are because they all are the same. They feel like NPCs are all doing the same thing, the same like POV at a convention, the dealing and whatever. And I know people like that. They want to see like the human interaction part of it. I get all that. I'm not trying to criticize it, but it's hard to differentiate, you know, where back in the day it's like, oh, you're the guy who really likes Magikarp, but you're the one who really likes, you know, you really want that Trophy Kangaskhan. Or like I could pin people down by a lot of the stuff they're collecting, where this is a lot of just collector LC, vendor after vendor after vendor after vendor. So I think it does change the complexion of the market. I don't know what that'll do long term for things like vintage. I think what's going to happen is you're going to hit a point where I think modern's always churning and burning. And you're going to have, I think from the opener question there with Paul, is a good example of how dynamic markets can be, where he's someone who's playing, and he's one of probably multiple, who are playing in modern, selling this stuff, you know, profiting from it, and then, you know, funneling that or streaming some of it into vintage. I think basically what goes on in vintage right now is it's just much more quiet. I would frame it more as quiet than stagnant, because majority of the stuff I've been selling in the past month or so, every single day, I think today's my first day off of not having to ship a package. I'm not joking. It's been every single day. So my point is that it's definitely happening, but it's just more quiet. It's like these things are still selling. I've sold probably 5 to 10 Ivy Pikachus. I've sold I don't know how many of the Charizard Neo reverse cards, you know, from 2000. How many first edition based commons? Like I can just go down my eBay sales. Like I only give you the top 25. Like I can just go through like the however many daily sales, and majority of it's going to be vintage. So I think where I am with it is it's quiet. It's definitely more than fine. The quietness of vintage, if anything, insulates a lot of the noise. If any, the barriers to entry keeps it more insulated. But yeah, we lose out on the upside of what hype can give you, the literal upside of, you know, so many people transacting, and like what you're saying, rip ship, whatever it is, that's transacting, you know, that's sales volume or whatever, that's money in the market. So yeah, it's a catch-22. I prefer that slow and steady, as I've probably said 100 times now. So I don't mind it. But yeah, I'm in the same boat where, you know, the other intricacies you're talking about of like having a backlog built up since 2016. I have all that stuff. And I guess I just don't have going back to the idea, I don't have like a strict specified game plan outside of, you know, I'm just keep on keeping on and really just try to keep these things going as long as that's going. That's really what I started with. I started with, as long as I'm saving money and or increasing inventory, I'll keep doing this. That's what I said from the beginning, and I'm just that's it. That's my business plan there. So yeah, that's where I am with that in particular. But overall, yeah, I think you're on to something. How the reasons why modern is doing what it's doing is because a lot of these people coming in are collector LLCs. And again, no, I'm not trying to throw shade by just the NPC thing I said earlier, but it's a way to highlight how they aren't really collecting as much, and it's more of a vendor collector. You know, it's someone who's like, I think vendor collector is best to come up with. Collector LC, I don't know what they really like. Like I have a guy, for example, who's been buying some good stuff for me, and he really likes Pikachu. So he wants like these top cards of Pikachu, and it's like, okay, your impression now is locked in. I got you locked in with the Quadros of the world and the other Pikachu collectors, where like these guys who are buying boxes from me, I'm like, for the life of me, could not tell you one of their names, because it's all the same. It's like they just, I talk to them wherever it is, Instagram, and I do a box, and I can't differentiate them, you know, because they're all doing the same thing. So again, I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm just trying to highlight how that is definitely a lot of what you're seeing, and you saw basically none of that 5 years ago. So yeah, that's a big reason why we're having the dynamics we are right now. Ali Click says, hey Scott, I'm curious what the trading card IP besides Pokemon you think has the best long-term potential with value and popularity. Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, One Piece, etc. To be honest, I have little to no knowledge of most anime, manga, etc. So maybe One Piece is like up there with it, but the one that stands out here to me is Disney, especially because they own now Star Wars and Marvel. It's seriously Disney's game to lose. Disney's basically like, I'm trying to think of an analogy for you guys. Like, I don't want to say Toronto Maple Leafs because that's giving Toronto way too much credit. Sorry, Toronto fans. But something like that where you have a stacked team and it's just yours to lose. That's it. Maybe 08 Patriots or something like that. You know, some undefeated team. Like, Disney's got so much in their corner. Like, they could show up like drunk to the game and probably win. Like, That, to me, it's got to be them. Like, it's theirs to lose. They have the most. Any other startup TCG, other IP, whatever, they would. I don't know what they would do to get to where Disney is. As global recognition, sentiment. They have numerous generations now that appreciate them. Yeah, it's got to be that. And again, it's theirs to lose. Like, I'm thinking of other undefeated teams, like '08 Patriots, I think, comes to mind because I think they lost, didn't they, to Giants, like 2017 or something in the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure they did. Anyway, that's one. Because I was going to say Red Wings 01 too, but they won. And they were a stacked team, one of the best teams ever, but they won. So anyway, that's what it's like. It's like they got everything going for them. It's theirs to lose. So that'd probably be my answer. But that doesn't mean I'm right. Doesn't mean it's going to go up in value. Just looking at like their IP success, like you can't underestimate IP right now. It's just something that so instantaneously connects with somebody. I think it's very hard. Like if I wanted to imagine and just create a new world of like not Pokemon, but something similar, if I wanted to create that, it's a very hard endeavor because you have to create like that thing that people get attached to, which with IPs, it's already there. Disney, it's just there. It's already just waiting for you to engage. So yeah. Auction Mike says, nothing is going to perplex me more than the PSA 10 2023 Paladin Wooper selling for almost 1,000 AUD. Dude, Modern is like, hold my Cheetohzard. Like, it's just wild right now. Yes, that's right, Wooper. Everyone's favorite Pokemon. Yet I am here. Isn't that the Pooper? Is he the brown one? Isn't that Pooper? Or am I thinking of a different one? Anyway, to make it even crazier. Here I am with the PSA 10 first edition base set commons, barely hitting 200, 300 if I'm lucky. Markets will remain irrational longer than I can keep my sanity. Yeah, it's wild. It's seriously a wild time right now. Like, that thing you just said, even about the 10s, when I look at my first edition base 10s, I'm like, okay, the ones I have numerous copies, that's fine. But yeah, some of these I have like one or two of. I don't list them. It's just not worth it. Like once I get down to like that lower quantity, I'm like, I'll just wait and see. But yeah, if that PS10 Pooper is doing 1,000 AUD, that's just crazy. Bob the Builder says, how do you scale Whatnot streaming operation to $1 million a month? Do you do Whatnot? Do you have a thing you should... Are you Bob the Builder on there? And who is your favorite Whatnot streamer? Also, this with the stock crypto market crashing, what's your recession tip? Are you going to eat rice and beans? I already do. Pokemon is doing one of the best despite the market crashing. Do you think it's still continue if we go into recession? Actually, the last question there is decently serious. I think Pokemon doesn't always correlate, and collectibles don't always correlate with like the traditional market. A lot of people are always trying to point to crypto and other things like that. And I don't doubt that they have some type of seepage into collectibles, but it's not a direct line. A lot of what goes on, let's say like with tariffs or whatever talks happening, that sentiment very quickly affects the market, where it doesn't work that way with collectibles. It's a lot, because at the end of the day, it's a passion project. It's not something where you're typically not doing this like you would when the perspective portfolio is just purely fuel. It's like, how much fuel can I add for when I retire, whatever. That's all it is. It's purely a fuel, like, let's grow the fuel tank. Where, a lot of the people who are buying these cards, it's much more varied. And typically there's a lot more sentiment involved and emotion. So it's not going to have the same correlation, and definitely not the same direct reaction to some crazy thing that goes on in the news, which happens almost every hour now. But yeah, as for the thing about, I couldn't even name a Whatnot streamer. No offense to anyone on there. Somebody dropped a link the other day in Discord that I clicked, and I felt like an old man. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. Like, it opened up to Whatnot, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this stuff means. I'm out of here. It's just too fast for me. It's not my thing. And I know, it's funny because like guys I skate with, they were telling me, like, one of their friends who was a cop or something quit to just do Whatnot streams, and more power to him. But they're like, hey, do you know who he is? I'm like, dude, I couldn't name a single person on Whatnot. Maybe there I just did. That's the best I could do, and I still don't even know his name. So anyway, that's my answer to Whatnot. I've yet to know a single person on there. Chivu says, sup, SM Pratt, I started collecting seriously about 3 years ago, purchased a Mew Gold Star as my first ever slab, and since then I've been hooked, and I've always loved and enjoyed the hobby for what it is. I'm 23, and since then I've strictly only picked up 2 high-end cards per year, so my personal collection is small, about 9 slabs in total. There are a bunch of smaller $100 and $300 cards I wanted, but didn't buy since capital is limited. And the goal was to knock out my grails first, which stings a bit now since most have doubled in price. But now the current market, I decided to just step away from all the noise. I'm unsure about prices since they went up so quickly, so I decided to start collecting the smaller cards that haven't had dramatic growth. The ones people aren't paying much attention to until things start to sizzle down a bit. My question is, what advice would you give me moving forward that I have more disposable income and I want to get deeper into collecting and growing personal collection? Thanks. So there's a lot there. First off, I think that there's something to waiting out a period of uncertainty and getting that certainty. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're looking at a car, just throw a price out there, whatever it is, that jumped up from like, let's say 500 to 1,000. And then you're like, okay, do I think this is sustainable? I think it's better just to wait that out and get more consumer confidence, even if the price doesn't have a ton of volatility. It's like, well, at least you know now this thing held for 6 months or whatever. And that's what I've done a lot of the times. And, you know, taking outside of Pokemon, I did that a lot with the Magic cards I bought. And luckily, you know, for the Alpha stuff, it's continued to go up overall, but there was volatility in between. So yeah, I think that's a common practice. Another thing I would say is that typically going for the most valuable is the suggested strategy. Now, you can be in trouble with modern stuff because, as we've seen with waifus, you could say, oh wow, these Erica Vileplumes when they were peak, I'm scared, FOMO, right? And you might miss it forever. And then of course a lot of them sizzle down. So it can be a little more risky with modern, but like if you're going into vintage, especially stuff like Gold Stars, usually why people say go for the most valuable one is, let's see what Rayquaza has done over the past 5 years versus like one of the dog trios. You know, I feel like Rayquaza is probably, safe bet, going to be a little bit more pricey today, and or it's going to hold at a higher premium than a lot of those lower tier cards. So again, it's up to you. Ultimately, it's you know your comfort zone. You know how much disposable income you have. You know, for example, two people can have the same amount of money. One might be someone who's like, all right, I'm going to take out a credit line, do whatever. Or someone might be chicken shit like me and who's like, I don't want any debt. I don't want any of that stuff. You know, you can have the same exact numbers on paper and have totally different, you know, perspectives and ways that you treat things. So that is, I think, the general advice is just that you usually buy the most expensive first, because like my Charizard purchase or my Black Lotus purchase from years ago is much lower than what it is today. And the common, uncommon cards, even if they doubled in price, they're still probably $20 to $40, you know, or $20 to $50. So that's the thing to consider, is not only just percentage jumps, but also like, what's the cost of capital going to be on this cheap card down here 5 years from now versus the card today 5 years from now. But again, with that said, I think there is something to waiting out a moment of uncertainty. I've done that I don't know how many times where I'm like, I don't know if this is right, waiting a bit, and I'm like, okay, you know, it's been 6 months, 8 months or whatever, I'll go in now and buy it. So that's, again, these are all just strategies and choices available to you. I'm just trying to give you the perspective on them. It's ultimately up to you. I can't possibly give the perfect answer because, again, you can have the same numbers on paper and one person can be so much more aggressive than the other, and they wake up feeling like they're going to take risks today and maybe tomorrow they don't. I know someone who bought a timeshare, went to sleep, woke up the next day and canceled it. Like, it's just wild. Like, humans are crazy. They're all over the place. So yeah, that's the best I can do with that. But all I can say is, yeah, the market is just, it's tough right now to know. Certainty is not there. There's a ton of volatility everywhere. Certainty is not there right now. The irony is when it's a down market, certainty is right next to you. You know, you're certain that this market's down and it's chilling out. But when it's up, it's like people don't know what to do. Like, people are like, oh shoot, like, is this what's going to be forever? Because sometimes it is. You know, some cards it's like, well, that's it. But with Gold Stars, I think you still have time on your side to reassess. There's always going to be another Gold Star. You know, you can always just go down a grade, you know, with a Gold Star, even with the best stuff. You know, I know it's going to be pricier for the Rayquazas or Charizards or whatever, but anyway, that's really, we could spend forever just, you know, pontificating about this topic. But yeah, that's really the overall advice. Azref says, I'm butchering that, by the way, sorry. Hey Scott, I hope I made this for the Q&A. You've been a wealth of knowledge ever since I started collecting, which was the end of 2019 when Vivid Vultures first came out. Oh yeah, that was a good time. The first Pikachu set. I can safely say you are Professor Oak to my hash. Just wanted to say thank you for all the S and Pratt sayings, giving me a fresh perspective compared to the other people. I started on collecting watches, and I tried to find someone like you in that space of collecting, but to no avail. Hence, it made me more grateful for your continuous presence on Patreon. Thank you. And not, by the way, I appreciate that, man. And now to my question, with the recent happenings on the prototype cards, if you watch YouTube where there was a test print of the coughing sample card that was on sale in Japanese stores. There are also listings on Mercari for Snap and some trophy cards. I don't know if you can tell if a listing is real or not on Buyee or Mercari, or even if I do visit Japanese card shops, they sell things and it turns out to be printed. What is your take on this, and what's your advice moving forward if people want to buy trophy cards? Apologies for the long question. Thanks once again. Best, your Ash. I was gonna say Ash would be a good nickname for your actual name, because I'm so bad at names unless it's like even like Chibu earlier. There's 3 O's. I'm like, am I saying that right? So as for your question about the Snap coughing, first off, can't be overstated. There's no guarantee on the Japanese markets. No, their guarantee is if you don't think it's real, don't buy it. That's the Japanese guarantee. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Or even better, go buy it from another seller at that price. Like, there's nothing. That's a totally foreign concept to them. So there's no guarantee buying that way. Now, when you're talking about a test print of a coughing Snap for sale in a Japanese store, there's a lot of caveats there. What some of those stores will do is put up, let's say, like a printout of the cards they have, where it's kind of like you guys remember the old video game way of when you go like to Toys R Us or something, you take one of the little card things out and you bring it up to the counter and then they give you the actual game. That's a method they might use. But just basically saying it's not necessarily like a nefarious thing going on, or I don't know, like a Snap test print to me at this point. If you say anything to me, if you say any trophy card test print at this point, I'm just like, no, dog. Like, I'm good. Like, that's a no for me, dog. Like, there's no way. It's just too much for me. And again, tying in the thing about risk appetite, mine is for that type of stuff right now, tying in value assessment with what we know about all the Akabane things going on. I wouldn't feel confident in it. So that aside, I think it might be in that lane of someone just having that old Toys R Us method of like, okay, we have this card. But if you're actually talking about a potential Snap test print, I can't even possibly pretend to think about it at all. Like, that's my best answer. So to get into any of the other weeds about, Mercari, Yahoo, whatever, I can't even entertain a test print at this point until we know what the actual F happened with all the prototypes. Until that is answered, all that stuff to me is on permanent pause. And I've always shouted pretty heavily in Patreon about unverified, lack of secondary source items. You're always absorbing the risk. And back in the day, it seemed like there wasn't any risk, because when it was all simple and we were all living in the Pokemon Garden of Eden, there's only 39 copies of Illustrators, and they have the one extra that they hole punch and just hang it, so gracefully on the wall at Pokemon. It's like, and like, oh wait, other people, executives were giving them, artists were giving them, and maybe there's other copies. Like, you can't. I'm being ridiculous, but it's like you can't have the confidence anymore. Like, it's like Al Gore the Cave, the toothpaste is out of the tube. Like, the law of entropy has hit Pokemon hard, and you can't reverse it. You can't just be like, okay, well, all that stuff that did happen, we just pretend didn't. So yeah, that's where I am with this. If there's any silver lining, with all the prototype potential test prints, whatever, it's stuff that I've been privy to for over a decade now, that I have tried so hard not to let ruin other people's experience, and tried so hard not to be like a Debbie Downer about. And you've probably got little whiffs of it here or there. Now it's all out there. Now you can see like, oh yeah, some of the people work for Pokemon, they got a sniff of money and they're like, oh man, I can make all this money doing this. And this is like one of the worst case scenarios. So yeah, if you're speaking to like a potential test print, that's where my headspace is, and it's been there a long time. I hope I'm interpreting your question correctly and not just using it as an excuse to rant. But yeah, for the consumer confidence in relation to Japanese markets, it's always a big risk. Like, there's no way to ever buy from Japan, have an authenticity guarantee, even if we're just throughout the test print nonsense. Like, it's a real card, you think it's a real card. If it shows up and it's like a Pokemon card, like, you're just stuck with it. That's it. There's not really any recourse. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you could do a nuclear charge pack. That's what some people do, and they nuke their accounts. I've heard other stories where people who, like, I guess I could probably do this too and leverage my long relationship with Buyee or whatever middleman, say, hey, I've done this much business with you. Like, come on, like, make this right. But that's, again, these are larks. These aren't real. This isn't a guarantee. So I don't know. Hopefully I'm covering what you asked there, but I don't feel safe spending that much money on big items like that. I used to be so cavalier. Like, I bought an Illustrator from one feedback buyer. I bought a TMB number 3 from one feedback buyer. I bought some cards, some wild cards. I bought a Trophy Kangaskhan that people thought had a bend in it or a crease, but it was the sleeve, and I bet on it that it was just, I was like, I think it's a sleeve. I don't think it's actually creased. I was right, but that's a major risk. Like, buying that from Japan, it's like, you don't know. You just don't know. That's a big, big cowboy move. So that type of stuff, I don't, it's like a different person. Maybe more to the point about the dynamics of economics and people spending. I'm one same person, metaphysical example right there. Back in the day, I was much more risk averse or whatever, and now I'm just an old man. So anyway, I'm in the same boat. I think today, even if you are the riskiest buyer or whatever, stuff like that, the door is just shut on those test prints for now. And there needs to be a lot of due diligence and clairvoyancy. I don't know what word to use, like transparency. We just need to know what the F happened with all these prototypes before anybody has any more consumer confidence with that stuff. Because if it were on a marketplace where you have protection, I'd be more confident. But even then, I would just be like, I don't want to go through the hassle. It's just me a hassle. Like, look at the people who are dealing with this stuff right now. This guy just might be living here. You know, it's just no one even knows. This stuff's been sitting for weeks now. CGC, no answer. Just silence. So, anyway, sorry about the ramble. Appreciate the compliment. Good question. Moving on to the last few. We have My Name is Blaine saying, hey, SM Pratt, how easy is it to get Spectator badges at Worlds? I'm looking to go to Anaheim for my first Worlds, and I'd love to buy merch too, but will I even be able to go if I don't win the lottery? And will I have to buy a badge? Also know what the background is for the 2008 11th movie Gym Challenge, Luxury Ball. I've been searching and haven't been able to find an explanation on E4. Oh, I actually know this one. The total pop is 117 for PSA. I don't see them available online, so even though the pop report is popularity based, I don't get the feeling there was a crazy high amount of these cards distributed. And finally, I'm not sure if you're still trying to get push more of your cards through your auctions, but here's a monthly reminder to do that. That's good. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's something I definitely need to do. I probably complain too much about with you guys. So I know the card you're talking about. I've actually sold a few and consigned a few of these. I think it was like a gym challenge prize. During that time, you had a lot of gym challenge prize cards, and it was mainly that type of release that you saw, especially back then, because you didn't have all the cool Scream promos, Van Gogh Pikachu, Mario Pikachu, or, you know, ponchos and all that yet. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that was like an 11th movie gym challenge prize. That's the best I got on it. But I remember when that stuff came out. I remember when the movie promos came out, the Darkrai one that came with it, like the 10th anniversary, that luxury ball, a lot of that stuff during that era. And yeah, most of it was like gym challenge tournament stuff, you know. So that's the best I got on that one. I don't know the exact, outside of that, you know, if you could get tournament information, that's the only way you can know how it's distributed. I don't even think it exists. The other thing about Worlds, so right before sitting down, it was just announced that I think badges are going to be $100 if you get them in the lottery, and I can't even speculate on what they're going to go for secondhand. Now, I know some people on E4 are good about sharing their badges. I'll be completely honest. I don't think there's much to do in Worlds outside of going to the store, maybe just taking it all in, you know, doing a walkthrough and taking in the atmosphere or whatever. Really, the main value at Worlds is just meeting up with people. You know, that's really it. And now I think they do, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they do allow some vendors for some reason. That's what I heard. For the longest time, they didn't. But nonetheless, it used to be like $10 for a Spectator badge, and I think it went up to like $40 or something. Now it's at $100. While it sucks, I get it. You know, it's a limited venue and probably too much demand. You know, I've heard people pay $200 for those things or whatever. So that's where you are. You know, if you win it, it's $100 now. And if you don't, yeah, you're left with either buying it and or I'm sure someone will let you borrow it. Because again, I don't think you really need a permanent badge at this point. Is just not really necessary. Here's an idea that might happen: is a rent a badge. Like there might be people just like, hey, I'll give it, you know, $10 for an hour or something. Because that's honestly, you can get it all done that time. As if the store is not too crazy. That's the other caveat, I guess. The more and more I say, I feel like it's just Worlds does. You have to come in expecting more work than you used to. It used to just be like a chill and do what you want, which I still think it is outside of the main event. But yeah, if you want to be in there and doing those things, there's a little more red tape, and I think that's what the current setup is. It's just $100 if you get the lottery, and if you don't, it's going to be borrow or buy from someone else. Paul K says, hashtag team double dip. Hey Scott, you used buying Japanese seal as an example in your MMR for investing in fundamentals, aka doing the boring thing and not chasing signals. May I ask why you think Japanese seal is a good example of that? Is Japanese seal what you mainly have been buying to invest in fundamentals? There are just so many other great investments in fundamentals, such as your underrated pick for Staff World promos, PSA9 Japanese Holos, Shadowless Holos. And I was curious to know your reasoning for highlighting Japanese sealed. Apologies if I read into that too much. No, that's a good question, because like I do all that stuff and I have all the things you mentioned. You know, I've been saying in the past few videos when we get to purchases how I've been buying Worlds promos now for a while. I don't know what I'll do with them. Initially, it was going to be for a binder, but I've gotten multiples now of some, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. The value just makes no sense to me, so I just keep buying them. It's not... I think you asked the initial question, too. I don't have, like, this super specific strategy. It's more just chasing a value. Can't possibly get it all at once. You know, funds are limited. Time, even more importantly, is limited for me. So I can't possibly see it all at the same time. With Japanese sealed in particular... part of it is I have to buy. Like, I'm buying from a distributor, so I have to buy to keep that line open. You know, if I don't, it goes away. That's just the reality. So I have to keep buying it. And I think that in that reality, I don't mind holding this stuff long term. I've yet to have a set that I bought go down. Obviously, there's short-term volatility, but I think I'm still above cost on everything. It's just barely little to no profit. You know, it's not worth processing. But at the end of the day, it's like, I don't mind just holding that. More importantly, this stuff won't be here forever. Now, compounding the modern fervor that we have, once Japanese decides to phase out and say, whether it's a 3-year window, you know, pick your poison, whatever the window is, that's going to have some effect. You know, even if it takes a box from 50 to 100, you know, and it sits at 100 and there's other stuff going on with more opportunity, that's okay. I'm already in profit. I don't mind waiting. There's no downside at this point, especially if I'm getting I'm wiping out my cost. I'll just sit on it. It's very easy. It fits in also to where I am lifestyle wise. Like, I don't have the time to do the day-to-day like I used to. I used to spend hours each day scouring Japanese markets, looking stuff up like that. And I think the value proposition today doesn't make any sense. I would just be draining a ton of time. And a lot of that made more sense 10 years ago or so when I had more time. And also I needed it more. You know, I put in that work. Just like someone like Crosby doesn't need to work on like his balancing like he used to when he was growing up in like midgets or whatever, like AAA. Like, he doesn't have to do that anymore. Like, there's certain things that's good to stay on top of. You know, I'm trying to throw a sports analogy out, but like Crosby doesn't need to work on like his fundamentals of his wrist shot. You know, I don't know how to say it. That's probably not the best example, but I'm just trying to spitball to say that like I don't have the time. The value proposition for that to me with Japanese sealed, it makes the most sense for me. Not only because I get a good price from a distributor, but I also have the obligation. I have to keep doing orders. That's just how it works. Otherwise, you just don't get to buy anymore from a distributor. And it makes sense. Like, why there's going to be like, oh, you only want the good set? Like, you only want the 1-2 sets or whatever a year. So, yeah, that's just how it's always been. That's true, I think, for English as well. I can't even imagine what it's like for English. Now it's so cutthroat and so Wild West. You know, there's not as much regulation and honor. But nonetheless, that's why I do what I do. But yeah, I've all this other stuff. I have it all, too. That's the other thing. I have everything you mentioned. First edition-based non-holos. I have so many. I probably still have the largest position on them. I have so many of those cards. Still. I have, like, boxes I find because of purchases I did make. You know, the other thing to throw in here, too, is I've been doing this forever. You know, if I just stop buying right now, I've already bought more than, like, 90+% of people ever will. Like, I bought like a madman before. Like, I can name tens to hundreds of first edition based purchases I made. Like, so many over the years. Whether it's a complete set, partial set, already graded, 9s, 10s, pick your poison. All over the place. So, that's the other thing to throw in there. You're only seeing snippets of what SM Pratt has been. Like, there's no way to give you the whole anthology. So anyway, that's the more comprehensive answer to the sealed thing. It's an obligation, plus it makes more sense for me right now. It's easier to set it and forget it. that's great for me. That works great for me. I'd rather do that, rinse and repeat, than scour for hours online to find that one diamond in the rough. I just don't have that time anymore. And even the stuff that I do believe is undervalued, I already have a decent position in it. Sure, I could add to it. Sure, I can buy more. Maybe I should on some of it. But yeah, it's again that value proposition of I gotta live my life at some point. That's really what it is. I'm at a point now where there's so much pressure and so much going on. I think you're the one too asked about, earlier with your other question about I just remembered it, with supplemental incomes and other revenue streams. It's gotten to a point now where I'm like, my other revenue streams are bigger than my main revenue stream was 10 years ago when I was like scouring things online. So it's like I gotta just find a way to let myself enjoy things, because it's gotten to a point where the value proposition is it. That's like the takeaway in this video is really the value proposition. Anyway, I feel like I'm spending way too long on this question, so there you go. And also, I somehow answered your first question. I've remembered. I don't know how my brain works. Anyway, Kendall collects. Hey Scott, what would you say the rules and behaviors are that you have that you live by for growing exponentially in the hobby? What does it take to bridge the gap between a high-end trophy card collector? How do you manage liquidity of what you currently have versus acquiring new product? Thanks in advance. So the biggest thing with this that worked for me, and I think it's universal for everybody, is I always had a super, super low cost of living. Major, major, major low cost of living. Like I basically could funnel majority to everything that I was making back into the business for the longest time. Obviously, when I'm living at home and college with my little college job, it almost all went to Pokemon. Because what are my expenses? I have no real life expenses yet. And then, when I moved out at the ripe old age of 25, I had real life expenses, but they were still very, very low because I buffered myself, for years. I had savings. I already had inventory. I was able to buy more than the average person back then. To be able to spend $1,000 a month back then on Pokemon cards, like 2011, 12, somewhere in there, that's a lot, for just a dude. For a business, maybe not, but like just for a guy, this is times when like graded cards, some cards even have value added for being graded. So low cost of living, already had an establishment, going into it. By then in 2012, I already had a lot of big things out of the way. I already had my Illustrator, already had SSBs done. I had most of Trophy Peak is done. I think almost all of them at that point. The TMBs, ironically, were the last ones to acquire, but that this is like done. Like the hard stuff's already behind me. So that's where I went in. Now, not everyone can have the same situation, but I always emphasize lowest cost because it really is about your burn rate. All of it's relative. When I talk to people who make insane amounts of money, but they have insane expenses, I have family members who one of them's a surgeon, and they probably make a killing, rightfully so, because it's an insanely stressful, insanely highly trained, high capacity job. It's just insane. I remember seeing a TikTok that was, when they ask people on the street what they make, and there's some guy and he's like, oh, I make $900K, and everyone's like, oh, like what? That's a ton of money. And they're like, what do you do? He's like, I'm a pediatric heart surgeon. It's like, okay, yep, makes sense. Like I would not want that job. That's insane. It's an insane job. My point of all this rambling is that like your burn rate for someone like that who is a surgeon, you probably had a ton of expenses going into it. Med school is expensive, similar to lawyers and things like that. So you're going to have a higher cost of paying down the debt, especially if you're living in an area that's more expensive. I tried to neutralize debt right out of the gate. I tried to minimize my expenses, and that allowed me to to basically be more free, perhaps even sloppy at times. I don't like to think I'm that sloppy. I'm very meticulous, maybe to a fault. And that's what it was. There's no no quadratic formula that's like buy this, that's going to get you here, outside just saying, fundamentals are better than market trends or something. I don't know. But ultimately, that's what did it for me. Keeping the expensive down. My burn rate has always been low. I don't like debt. Keeping that low. That's how it works for me. I know guys who have credit lines and do whatever, and they make that work. I just don't have that hustle in me. Like there's a guy I play hockey with, and he sold peaches on the side all through college. And he's just a natural born salesman. Not even like an annoying, not like some greasy used car salesman. He's just able to I'm a little more reclusive, shy, and he's not. And he did this peach thing where he bought peaches and sold them and got so big that he hired someone to do it. And from peaches, he bought like I think he bought some other thing from that, just doing that. So anyway, it's something where it can work differently for other people. Some people have different attributes, and that's what it was for me. Is low cost of living really helped me, and I always advocate that because, excuse me, it's kind of a silent thing that you don't realize. Because you can have, let's say, you can give someone right now $5 million free and clear, but if they live in a place like California, if they have a lot of debt, if they have, let's say, expensive tastes or whatever, that's gonna be a shorter runway than someone who has 5 million on no actual debt, no mortgage, and they live pretty minimally and wear the same athletic shorts and t-shirts all the time. That money is going to be a lot longer of a runway. So anyway, that's the invisible metric I think that people don't discuss enough, and it helped me tremendously. And that's always my go-to answer for these type of questions, because everyone can tell you buy this, buy that, and that's all surface level. Like, I think that thing about lowering your expenses is hugely important. It's not discussed enough. And tying in the thing about how there's always notifications, noise, buy this, do that, whatever, sale, whatever, constantly buy, whatever. It's even more true today. The more resistance you have to that, I think the better off you are. And that's how I've always been. I've been very minimal. Outside of collecting, is very, very minimal. So that's a huge thing that helped me, and that's probably the best answer I can give. And one other thing, when you talk about liquidity, I didn't really worry about that as much until I need to sell. Liquidity only matters if you need to sell. That's really it. If you need to move stuff, great. But like, I have plenty of illiquid items that people used to drag trophy cards. It's funny enough. People used to be like, no one likes that. No one grew up with it. Real things, real statements people were fully confident in. No one likes those. No one grew up with those. There's no nostalgia to them. Dead ass statements people made, 100%. So, I had no problem. They're like, they're not liquid. That was another thing. They're not liquid. And I'm like, okay, so what? What? It's like, oh man, that illustrator paid like what? The lowest price ever for, probably in human history. Oh no, it wasn't liquid. Like, who cares? Like, so anyway, just throwing that out there is another food for thought. Is that liquidity really only matters if you need to sell. Nick Hill says, "Hey Scott, hope you've been doing well with the spring weather. It's starting to come around where you're at." Yeah, if you hear anything up here happening nasally or whatever, it's because weather's changing. I have like the immune system of an 80-year-old man. I've been recently thinking about the rarity aspect of collecting with Pokemon. Do you ever think there are moments like right now where extremely rare trophies and promos are affordable, ranging in 1 to 10K, and compared to the future where they will not be available other than the new floor price is significantly higher? I know we're a young hobby, but at times I'm wondering when people actually realize what rarity means, how almost overnight the price changes will occur. As you've said in the past, it only takes a few people with limited distribution. These numbers of 15 and 20 cards that fall in that high rarity slip on radar. Feel free to riff and have a good day. Yeah, you're 100% in the zone. Like, I had a call that I think I mentioned with a sports collector who was asking about nice MP because he's like, I don't understand why these aren't multi-million-dollar cards. Because he's used to dealing with one-on-one refractors, name the Mellow Ball, whoever it is. It's just some new guy came out. Their thing's going for 6 figures, or so-and-so's thing's going for $1 million. They're used to that all the time. They don't even bat an eye at it. So when he's translating that to Pokemon, he's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. So I do agree with what you're saying. It's just if/when, more on the when side, is it going to happen? And perhaps something I need to remind myself is that idea of, believe in these things like you have and just continue to hold them. It's tough because the ideas I just said about, to Kendall's question about trophy cards aren't sentimental, trophy cards aren't liquid. That was the criticism. That was the conventional wisdom back then. So yeah, it's tough because I feel like what you're saying is true, and maybe 10 years from now we'll look back and be like, man, it was wild when X card was only $1,000. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna happen. It's just which one and when, will it happen? So I think what you're saying is 100%. I think Pokemon, while it does exceedingly well for its age, it is still very young. It's still very, 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 very young. Like, think about guys like, whatever your opinion is of Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, I couldn't care less. My point is that that's a young person, okay? And if they're continuing in the market the way they are, what's that going to look like in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? Like, they're still so young. And I think if you translate that to hobbies, like, think about stuff like the other day I was walking through a museum and saw like these old space toys from like the 50s, you know, these little tin toys from the 40s. I'm like, why don't they put some Pokemon in here? I'm like, the average person walking through here is going to know Pikachu a lot more than these like Rin Tin Tin toys. Like, there's like maybe 1 to 2% of the people walking by this that will recognize it. And most of us now are looking at this like an artifact, which I guess in a museum it's appropriate. But my point is that this stuff will go that way. Pokemon is so far on the other end. It's not even in the middle. It's not even middle-aged. So, yeah, I 100% agree with this. It's not even limited to the hyper rare items. It goes down to even like first edition Blastoise. First edition, I always go to him because he's my guy. But like Mewtwo, Venusaur, Charizard, of course, like any of these cards. You know, even what we're seeing with Gold Stars and things like that. Like, what's that going to be in 20 years? You know, we have such a recency bias of like our price memory and, you know, the conventional wisdom of today and yesterday. Like, that yesterday can happen very quickly in Pokemon. There's a lot more tomorrows to experience the Pokemon than yesterday's. Like, we still got a long way to go. Long way to go. You know, look at any other hobby. Pokemon is so accelerated that we forget that. So, yeah, I think you're right. You could say that in every video, and I don't think you get tired because it's true. Like that guy I mentioned sports said that completely unprovoked. Like, I didn't provoke him at all to say that. He just said it on his own. He's like, yeah, he deals with these refractors. He deals with these 1/1s, 1/5s, or whatever. That's what he's in. He's in the high end of sports. And over there, you know, a low 6-figure card that's not even the top rookie or top whatever is like hitting with like some of our top cards over here. You know, like some of the 6-figure items we have are some of their like lower examples, you know, to like the Mike Trout or something is way up there in multi-millions, you know, like stuff like that. And yeah, we don't have that. And they have more sales volume with that stuff. And there's just things in Pokemon that are comparable that just, they lack sales value and they lack that awareness. Even when I was talking to him, I was like, yeah, you know, this is a real 97. He's like, well, what about this one in auction? I'm like, no, that's not an actual original 97. He's like, oh, this is why. That dude was very sharp and he got it immediately. He's like, yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve. So anyway, I think that those are all the issues there, but I can't overstate that Pokemon is more tomorrows than yesterdays, where those Rin Tin Tin toys, they don't have many more tomorrows. Like, they're at the end of their journey. Like, a lot of that stuff, even coins and stuff, it's just seen as like a museum piece. Like, what person's talking about coins today? Like, what? The coin collectors would kill for an ounce of the demand that Pokemon has for modern. You know, we talk about modern and its annoyances, but it's an annoyance of abundance. You know, we have an annoyance of an abundant demand that like these other collectibles they would love for kids to just get into coins because they don't care. It's just all old people. No offense. I'm in there too. I'm close to the vintage line. So yeah, that's there's me riffing on it basically. All right, last few questions here. We have Jose who says, hey, hello, I'm a new Patreon sport. Glad that you're here, first of all, and also that you decide to come out of Lurker Shadows. Thanks for creating this space to share and enjoy the hobby without repetitive talks about modern hype scalpers. My question is, which Japanese promos do you think are the most undervalued? Personally, I find it crazy that I can buy a PSA 8 Masaki promo for around $200, $300. Yeah, it's wild. Wild. Some of these Masaki cards right now are like selling at prices. You know, when I was talking 10 years ago, we always time travel on Patreon. I always got to tell you about every version of me. And back in the day, like, that's what they were going for. Like, it's bonkers. Like, I remember being on vacation in Florida and like 9s were in that range. So I guess, you know, 8s are one grade lower. But still, it's like that's so tight in value. Because basically what happens with Masakis is when you get that Masaki mark, you're screwed. Like, it's going to be, we'll just say a 7 to be nice. It'll be a 7 and under, usually 6 and below. But yeah, that's a great example. I think, honestly, a lot of the vintage stuff right now, a better way to phrase it rather than undervalued, is the cost of capital and consumer confidence have never been better. Because when you can compare this to what's going on in modern and say, you know, $500, look at what that gives you in modern. You get a PSA 10 pooper, like a Wooper, brown poop dip Wooper card, or like Masaki. I don't even care. Like, what's even the worst Masaki? Can we even say that? Like, because they're such good cards. Like, it's wild. Not Awake is in there. All that stuff. Just go to unnumbered promos on Bulbapedia. Any of that old back stuff to me just makes no sense. Even the Pikachu. Not Awake Pikachu's too cheap. And I'm saying too cheap for me. Doesn't mean it's going to change the market. But I have like 9s. I have a couple 10s, I think, of those. again, they've been sitting in storage. Doesn't make sense. I know how hard it was to get those. I remember even 10 years ago how hard it was to get them, and I don't even want to know how hard it is to get them now. I mean, I've actually bought one recently. I don't know if he's over here. 190 grade. Is it over here? No, that's English Pikachu. But anyway, yeah, I've been buying that stuff forever, and so I have like a cachet, if you will, of experience on all those old back cards. Koros have always been tough to grade. Also another one that feels underrated. And yeah, honestly, a lot of those unnumbered old back promos right now are just ridiculous. Like when I'm hearing some of these sales in here on modern stuff, the cost of capital and consumer confidence is just crazy. Because even if you buy it and it goes down a little bit, like you bought a card that's already 25 years old. Like that PSA 10 Pooper is still in production. Like the pop report's only going up on those cards, and it's going up fast. Like Masaki's are basically like drips, you know, especially on an 8 to 10 range, because your biggest thing with Masaki's is the mark in particular, which takes you down, you know, below that. So yeah, dude, I can go on forever about Masaki's, but yeah, that's great first question there and example, because outside the Gengar's definitely taken its own spot, which it's always been the most popular. It's just now the price reflects that a little more, but I can't overstate how it's always been the most popular Masaki card, you know, but I can't really name a bad one. I know people probably say Golem, but I like how it looks. It reminds me of the Mario Party Cutter. You know that game where you got like cut around the squid or the boo or whatever that is. That's what it reminds me of. But anyway, good question there. I can't unnumbered Japanese promos is my answer. Old back ones. It's just insane consumer confidence right now in cost of capital. All right, last but not least, as usual, we got Danny Heatley closing us out. Never forget 07. 1507 says, "Hey Scott, quick question on what you think about is the most underrated autograph on cards or PSA 910 old back Japanese holos." That's tough. I see pros and cons for both. Most notably, though, autos are a niche market, but I feel like they could have a higher ceiling when it comes to value, while Japanese old back holos have better liquidity. And if you want to sell them quickly, I can also imagine old back holos having a boom one day, like WotC had in the past, and how modern it is having currently. Both are in the shadows of modern, but which one do you think will have better value down the road? Thanks. Yeah, you basically hit on the head. Like, graded holos have a much more broad demand, you know, outside of even liquidity, just broad demand. So like, let's say vintage did what it did. You know, one of the trends you saw in 2020 when WotC started to accelerate is Japanese base went up too. And some of the other popular holos did as well, because there's a ripple effect where it's like, okay, I can't get, let's say, the Lugia first in whatever grade, so I'm going to go for the Japanese. And then that brings the Japanese up. Where with autographs, the number one thing that comes to mind with autographs is not every autograph is an Arita Himeno. Or even better, Arita Himeno Sugimori. Like Harada, I have Haradas from Worlds that haven't moved an inch from 20 years ago. You know, that haven't moved an inch. And I think that's what you're up against with autos. Like my autograph collection and some of my inventory, if you want to call it that, like things I have doubles of. It's just, I treat it as such an oddity to me. It really is something when I look at it, I'm like, I don't even know how to, like, the impression on it is very hard to thumb down. Like, it's just not, it's not like developed. I don't know how to say. It's not rendered. It just, when I see that like row of signed cards, I'm just like, I don't know what to do unless it's a Rita. And even then, like the Rita price to me just doesn't make sense. Like he's jacked up his premium, and rightfully so. Like, not even criticizing it, but it doesn't equate to, you know, what the price is on the market. So, and he's one of the made men. Like Arita is one of the most prominent, popular signatures. Of course, you know, he signs a lot or the most, but still, it's an easy sellable autograph where there's so many artists, like even stuff like that Jerky autograph that I talked about before. I don't know if that'll ever be more valuable than the day it was purchased. So that's what you're up against. I think the holos just have more widespread demand. Now, of course, because they're Japanese, they're a little more niche, but they still, I think, have that ripple effect. In a way, they're loosely tied to what's going on in English. It's like when there's a big enough splash, like they're still on the same body of water and they're going to catch that wave eventually. maybe not as much for like a Blossom or something like that, but even then, I've sold some obscure holo cards recently in 9 grades. Not anything super sexy, but like $50 or $100 for some of these cards. Like, that's a great return. Where a lot of the autographs, the problem you're up against now especially is the premium. First off, to even get a card signed at this point. That's another thing to throw in there. To get a card signed is already a task. That's a challenge. And then if you can, the price premium is typically higher. Even mentioning Jerky, nothing against him, not trying to be a jerk, but the price premium you're paying for a new artist like that is wild. Rita was charging like $20 back in the day. You're paying like $100 for some of these new artists. And again, more power to them. Charge whatever they think their value is. But my point is, that's not going to correlate to the market. I guess the best way to TLDR this is I think there's a lot of things happening in autographs that don't really translate to the market. For example, when you look at like a holo card, it's just about what's your cost basis and what's the market value. Where if you do that with autographs, it's already like, well, I can't even get to cost basis sometimes because I don't even know if I can get a card signed. So you have to worry about a preliminary problem. And then if you can get past that, now we do cost basis. And a lot of the times that's where it ends. If I'm paying $100 right out of the gate, and that's just the signing fee, not to mention I got to travel to be here. I don't got to travel to wherever it is to buy that Japanese holo from Japan or online. That's just sent to me. I don't got to move. So even to get to the cost basis, there's a lot there. It's a lot more complicated. I just think there's a lot more going on in autographs that don't really correlate to market value. And that's probably why it's hard for me to figure out how to treat them at the end of the day. I'm just thinking it through live right now with you. And yeah, I think that's really what it is that there's a lot of things happening that, it makes more sense. And I think it directly ties more to the market with cards when it's oversupplied, price comes down. When it's undersupplied, price goes up. Where like Harada signatures can be under or oversupplied. It just doesn't change. Like the value on a lot of these other artists just don't change. There was another one where that happened. I remember someone went to the signing, this was years ago, and they were like surprised because they spent all this money trying to make money, selling this stuff. And I remember the conversation. I think I had a call with them, and I was like, "Yeah, that's not a Rita." I can't remember who it was. One of the Saitos, or I can't remember who it was that they went to. Maybe a Riga or somebody. I was like, "That's a Riga, not a Rita." Like it was something like that, where they were basically frustrated how, excuse me, they spent all this money. This is back when you could like buy things and sell them, heaven forbid, sell an autograph, and it was fine. And yeah, they were just like disappointed how it didn't correlate. So yeah, after all that rambling, I think that those are my thoughts on Japanese holos. Not only have more broad appeal, I think the things that are there are more simplified. I think they make more sense. You can just look at what is my cost. There's little no barrier to entry. If I'm good, if I get a 10, for example, like if I bought a random holo card, and just hit the lottery, got a 10, I'm in the money immediately. If I got that at a good price, I'm good. Or like with autographs, even if you got a good signing premium or something, it's like, there's no guarantee it's going to sell. It's just tough. Like I have autographs, 2 of them sitting here on my desk, and I don't know. They're very odd. And I think another angle to throw in there is because there's so much resistance now against the secondary market in autographs, it makes it more complicated. There's just a lot of pressure with them. There's a lot. It's like being on a different planet almost. Like there's like different gravity settings on autographs. But yeah, I think that's what comes to mind. Like you have like a preliminary problem of, can you even get a card signed? Like that's an issue today. If you can, the premium now is so high for this stuff, and it's very infrequent. And maybe some of it's new artists, and that premium doesn't translate to the market. It's a lot. I don't know if that'll ever change. Some of these new artists, again, not trying to be a jerk to Jerky, whoever it is, he's just a recent example. But you're probably paying the final sale price for some of those cards getting signed. Like I'm grateful for, shout out again to Throwing Knife Killer, Noah, who got me that card. It's awesome. Like it means a lot to me sentimentally. But like there's no way I wouldn't sell it anyway because it's a gift. But if you're thinking about that, like I don't think it's ever going to be more valuable than probably the price paid at the event. So yeah, that's it. That's really what it comes down to. I've never thought it through until you asked that question, and I think that's what it is. You have all these issues. It's like different gravity settings right now in signatures, but again, they're kind of like they're like a memorabilia item, but Pokemon's always got to be weird with it. Like I don't know any of your other markets. Like yeah, you want to buy it, sell it, fine, no one cares. Where Daddy Pokemon, they see one sale happen and they're like, It's wild. Like they like send out a memo to the artist, like if you do this, it's over. I don't know how it works, but somehow they're not aware at all about what's going on with like anything in the market, you know, until it gets crazy and blows up in their face. But if there's one single sale of an autograph, like they immediately find it. So yeah, maybe if they had that much hyper focus on, you know, the set volatility or whatever, the promo distribution stuff, would be different. So anyway, appreciate the questions always, guys. Hopefully this didn't run on too long. Had a nice long Q&A there. As always, if you have any other questions, feel free to type them in the MR comments. We got another 10 days here. I usually try to record on today I think is the 10th, because I didn't have is the 10th or 11th? I don't know. Usually 10th or 11th I try to do, and then 20th, 21st, somewhere in there, just to give you an idea on the deadline. But can't thank you enough. All the reasons why I'm still here talking to a camera is Patreon. That's it. Your questions are great. It's even the last one, you know, and a lot of these questions help me think and, you know, keep me active and sharp and all that. So can't thank you guys enough. Gives me a lot of purpose. I'll stop being sappy, I promise. Ask your questions if you want. If you want to consign anything, feel free to message me. You still have about a week or so if you want to get anything in for this upcoming block. That's pretty much it. See you guys in about 10 days. Till next time.